She was walking by the sea, alone, or maybe just sad, when the sudden sound of a gunshot shattered the silence. Her heart froze as she turned and saw him, tall, handsome, dangerously beautiful, a man surrounded by bodyguards, his hand still holding the smoking gun. He had just killed someone. The heartless billionaire. When he pulled the trigger, a few drops of blood splattered across her face. He looked at her and smiled, a cruel, fearless smile that sent chills through her veins. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat, yet in that moment she saw it all. No fear, no mercy, only cold power. She turned away quickly, trembling, but as he walked past, his shoulder brushed hers slowly, deliberately. The touch made her heart stop. Without another word, he stepped into his luxury car, his gaze still fixed on her until he disappeared down the road. Only then did she notice the blood on her hand, the same red that came from his shoulder when he touched her. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the stain, unable to tell if it was fear, shock, or something far more dangerous awakening inside her. Julia came home trembling, her heart still echoing with the sound of that gunshot. She had never seen anyone die before, never seen blood like that, real, thick red. She was poor, innocent, fragile, and that night's horror kept replaying in her mind like a curse. She sat on the floor, her hands shaking, tears falling as the memory of his cold smile burned behind her eyes. Somewhere far away, in his grand mansion, Hami stood under the shower, the water washing away the blood, but not the image of her frightened, innocent face. That memory made him smile, dark and cruel, the smile of a man who found beauty in chaos. From behind, a woman's arms wrapped around him, her lips on his neck. "Not tonight," he said quietly, his voice distant. "I want to sleep." She laughed softly, whispering, "You killed another one of your competitors, didn't you?" Hami smirked. "They were just mosquitoes. Their noise annoyed me, so I silenced them." She smiled with pride. "You're getting more powerful, Hami. No one can reach you now, everyone respects you and fears you." But he didn't answer. His eyes were empty as he said, "I just want to sleep." Yet when he closed them, he saw her again, the girl by the sea, her terrified eyes haunting him. Morning came, and he met his lawyer and closest friend, Armin, in the garden. Armin joked, "You killed someone again, didn't you?" But Hami didn't reply. He was kneeling beside a cage of white rabbits, gently running his fingers through their soft fur. "Since when do you touch weak, soft things?" Armin teased. "You're more like a wild animal yourself." Hami's voice was calm, almost thoughtful. "Having a pet is peaceful. I want one beautiful, innocent." Armin's phone rang. His face changed as he answered. "Hami, someone saw you last night. A girl. She's reported you to the police." Hami's smile returned, slow, dangerous. "A girl, huh?" He leaned back, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "Looks like I've just found my pet." "They made me go to the station like I was the one on trial." His man handled the questions with that smooth, practiced politeness, while Hami arrived late and sat down opposite me as if we were old acquaintances. He smiled at me the whole time, that calm, unreadable smile, and when we left he leaned to one of his men and said, quietly, "Find everything about her," as if my life were a file to be opened. I went home shaking and told my friend every detail, the gunshot, his smile, the blood, and she stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "You reported a dangerous man? He can make you disappear. Just forget it." I could barely sleep. The image of his face wouldn't leave me. Hours later, I learned how quickly information moved in his world. They dug up my name, Julia, 20, mother dead when I was small, a father who loved money more than me, a string of part-time jobs I took to keep us afloat. And someone in his circle told Emma, his current girlfriend, that a girl had gone to the police. Emma's pride snapped into something brutal. She told her men to bring me to her. They found me alone, took me without ceremony, and when I woke I was shoved into a dim room and slapped until my cheeks burned, Emma's voice sharp, telling me I had no right to look at Hami, that I deserved worse. Then the door was locked and I was left in the dark. The kind of darkness that remembered the worst of my childhood, and sitting there with my hands folded over my knees, I felt cornered by a world that had suddenly decided I was nothing more than someone else's problem. When I woke, it was morning and the room smelled like cold linen and something faintly metallic. He had brought me somewhere that wasn't my dark room, somewhere too large for one person's grief. I sat up too fast and the world tilted. Hami was standing by the window, tall and still, watching the city wake. He turned as if he'd been listening for me to open my eyes. "You woke up," he said, as if it surprised him and pleased him at once. My mouth was dry. For a moment I could not move. Fear came back like a tide, but so did anger, hot and sharp. I slapped him without thinking. It stung my hand more than it stung him. He laughed dryly, as if my blow amused him. "Is that how you say thank you?" he said. The words landed like stones. "Thank you for kidnapping me? Thank you for torturing me." I spat back, voice trembling. "Thank you for saving me," he answered, and when he reached for my hand it felt wrong, like a thief caressing what he had stolen. I jerked away. "Don't touch me with your dirty hands," I said. He paused, something like a shadow passing over his face. Then he smiled the way someone smiles when a puzzle switches pieces inside their head. I pushed away from the bed and moved for the door. "I want to go home," I blurted. "I don't belong in your hell." He sank onto the sofa and watched me with that calm I was still learning to hate. One of his men, who had been waiting in the hall, whispered to another. Hami's friend murmured, "Where is she going?" Hami only said, "Wait and watch," and there it was, the little theater of power he loved. People moving at his signal, the world bending until he chose to release it. I ran from the room and found myself in a silent wing of the house, a place of marble and long shadows that swallowed sound. There was nowhere to go, no taxi drivers who would come close, no neighbors to shout for help. The house felt like a city that had decided I didn't exist. Panic rose again until my legs gave out and I sank to a step, sweating and gasping like someone who'd been held underwater too long. Downstairs, Hami sat in a meeting with men who wore thin smiles and thicker secrets. They spoke in measured sentences about rivals, threats and debts, but the air between them was small and barbed. "You killed a man close to Adrian," one of them said quietly. "Do you think he will simply walk away?" Another answered, trying to sound braver than he felt, "That man is dangerous. He will search for weakness." Hami's face changed at the name. Something cold and very, very old flared through him. "I remember now," he said, low. "I will make him pay." It was as if naming it gave the hatred shape. He sat straighter and the room leaned in. When I returned, because I had nowhere else to go, I found the meeting had broken up and Hami had left the table, anger in his jaw. There was blood on his hand, a neat dark line where something sharp had nicked him during the confrontation. And he ignored the men as if they were furniture and not witnesses. He saw me then, and for a second the anger softened into something raw and private. He crossed the room and took a breath that looked like relief. Without a word, he pushed a first aid kit toward me and then, perhaps because the motion required it, he let me touch his hand. My fingers brushed the cut. The warmth of him was absurd and awful, and it made something loosen inside me. I pressed a clean cloth to the wound and dabbed until the bleeding slowed. He watched me do it, not with the polite curiosity I sometimes imagined I saw in men at cafes, but with a sort of astonishment, as if it had been years since anyone had chosen to be gentle with him. "Does it hurt?" I asked, because it seemed the smallest, bravest question left between us. He looked at me like a man who had forgotten what a question was for. "No," he said finally. His voice had no claim in it, only observation. I stood and found myself holding his hand for a heartbeat longer than I intended, feeling the pulse there, the human tremor beneath his calm. That tiny contact made the room tilt again, this time toward something that was not purely fear. "I want to go home," I said again, softer. He didn't answer at once. Instead, he walked to a desk, pulled open a drawer, and set a contract and a pen in front of me. "You won't leave," he said flatly, as if stating a fact that puzzled him. My heart slammed. "Why?" I whispered. His lips twitched. "Because if you leave, I won't understand why I care." It was the most useless, honest thing he could have said, and it left me raw. Then he made me an offer with the kind of practiced calm that had probably closed more deals than 100 dinners. Stay here as my personal secretary for 3 months. You do not have to do anything illegal. You refuse anything that makes you uncomfortable. After 3 months, you are free to go. No tricks. There was power in the bargain, an ugly, pragmatic kind. It was also a leash, but I had been tied to worse things my whole life. A father who counted my wages, jobs that chewed at my hands and left me hollow. I looked at him, at the wound I'd bandaged, at the man who could make rooms empty, and I thought of the cold basement, and the slaps, and the dark that had raised me to flinch. Why would I trust you? I asked. He shrugged, the movement small, almost childlike. You don't, he said. You only have choices. I told him my conditions in a voice that tried to be steady. I won't do anything illegal. I won't be asked to lie for you. I won't share your secrets. And I won't be anyone's plaything. He read each condition and, to my surprise, nodded. Accepted, he said. He added one quiet thing that made the air pinch in my chest. I won't touch you without your permission. His words sounded strange in his mouth, like a promise he had either never made or never heard, yet they held. He gave me a room that could swallow my whole life and make me feel small inside it. High ceilings, a bed that looked like a throne, a window that threw the city into long, gold bars at dusk. For a moment I thought I was in someone else's dream, then I remembered how I'd woken there, uninvited, bandaged, and owned by a name I barely knew. The next morning, he took me out like I belonged to the world he moved through. We went to a mall that glittered with its own weather, marble floors, velvet light, shop windows dressed like altars. He walked ahead with the slow assurance of a man who knows the world rearranges itself around him. Change, he said, when a rack of dresses was handed to me. You're my secretary. You must look like someone who belongs at my side. Why? I asked, because I wanted to be blunt, because I had learned to say things that hurt before they could stick. I'm your secretary, not your girlfriend. You are my personal secretary, he corrected, smiling slightly as if the distinction were trivia he could enjoy. Appearances matter. I tried on dress after dress. He watched like a wolf tasting the air, no hurry, no hunger, only measuring. His friend and the bodyguards hovered like crows, eyes on us both, their silence a kind of applause. One of them finally let a compliment fall into the room. She's beautiful. Hami glanced at him, distracted, and said flatly, average. Try something else. Then he waved the man away, focus. It felt like a test I hadn't agreed to take. After that day, I began to go with him to meetings. I sat at the edge of his orbit, my files, my pens, my little notebook of practical things, and watched him at work. He avoided my eyes deliberately, like a man afraid of the snag of feeling. I learned how he commanded silence, a look, a sigh, the small tilt of his jaw. He was dangerous when he was quiet because that meant the room had been reshaped into his thought. One evening he was perched on the seawall, shoulders hunched against the wind, staring at the dark water as if it held a map of what he wanted. I came up behind him and sat, trying to be ordinary. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Aren't you scared of monsters now? No, I said, watching the horizon. The sea looks calm now, but storms are always folded in it. I'm not talking about the sea. He looked at me then, and for the first time it seemed he wasn't cataloging me. He was trying to read something in me that had nothing to do with work. He opened his mouth, then his phone buzzed. His girlfriend's name lit the screen. For a second I saw something like a private ache pass through his face. She called, he said, and there was something like shame in his voice. She misses me. Are you in love with me? He asked before I could think how to respond. I laughed, a broken sound. No, never. He shrugged and said, let's go home. At the house his girlfriend, Emma, saw us together and slid into us like a heat wave. She claimed him in bright, practiced ways. She kissed his neck and murmured that she'd missed him, pressing herself against a man who didn't return the press. Something like a needle prick of jealousy burned me, stupid, sudden, loud, but it was also sharp enough to remind me I was still alive. Hami did not react the way a man would to a lover's touch. There was no hunger, no turn of the head, no ownership. He answered her questions with bland practicality. How much do you want? Like money might buy the warmth she sought. Emma searched for a return and found none. She left puzzled, then angry. Later, in the privacy of his office, his friend watched me and said nothing. Hami caught my face in the lamplight. "What's wrong with your eyes?" he asked, blunt and oddly tender. I told him nothing and locked the office door behind me to keep the rest of the world out. He stepped close enough that my heart thudded against my ribs. "Why is your heart beating so fast?" he asked, calm as if asking after the weather. "Because you should focus on your girlfriend," I said, pushing him away half in jest. "We broke up," he said, as if that were news. He watched my face for a reaction. When relief flickered there, he seemed to notice it more than I expected. The next day, I wore a dress I would never have chosen on my own, shorter, softer, and the world shifted. We were in a meeting then, and I saw him change subtly. His body tightened, his breathing shortened, small human betrayals. He excused himself and told everyone to leave. Later, when he returned, his composure had been smoothed like a coat. One night, sitting in the silence after one of those business dinners, it happened. Someone asked if he had killed for advantage. "He killed a man," someone muttered. "The rival's man." Hami's face cut into something hard and terrible. "He was not a rival," he said. "He was a danger." There was a long, ragged pause, and then, almost too quiet to be believed, "Sometimes you must be cruel to survive." That line settled in my chest and began to rearrange things. He wasn't simply a monster who enjoyed power. He was a man who had learned to be cruel because the world had forced it on him. It didn't excuse what he was, it made him more dangerous, more human, and more impossible to read. Somewhere between the silk of the mall and the cold of the boardroom, I realized I was starting to understand a map he hadn't meant to draw for me, the places where brutality was armor and the small, secret spots where a man like Hami might still be wounded enough to want to be held. I woke that night because the house had grown too loud, too many breaths in the walls, and something in the corridor made my feet move before my head decided. Hami's bedroom door was half open, a sliver of lamplight cut across the carpet. For a foolish second, I told myself I was only going to look, to see if the man who had stolen my life was human when he was alone. He was standing at his wardrobe, the broad line of his back throwing a shadow like a wall. When he noticed me, he turned slowly, as if my presence were a thing to be admired rather than a person to be feared. "Why are you hiding?" he said, and the casualness in his voice was a blade. I tried to say I wasn't looking, but the words fell short between my teeth. He came toward me, steady, sure, and before I could step back, he took my hand and guided me inside. "Don't," I wanted to say. "Don't pull me into your world." Instead, my feet stayed where they were. Something in me folded toward him the way a moth forgets itself in flame. He watched me with a shameless smile that felt like permission and threat at once. He said nothing more than, "Stay," and that single command made my pulse loud enough to drown out thought. Then he reached for me. The touch at first was tentative, like someone testing a fragile thing, and then it was something else, more insistent, urgent. He watched my face while he moved, as if my expression were a ledger he needed to balance. Panic and heat ran through me in equal measures. I slapped him once, hard enough to make his eyes sharpen, but when he kissed me it was not with blind force so much as with a need that looked older than either of us. I found, grotesquely, that there was a part of me that leaned into it, that wanted to be known and crushed all at once. I do not remember every moment after that. The night folded in around us like a curtain, but I remember the shifting weight of it, his mouth at my neck, his hands mapping the edge of my resistance, the way my own voice kept surprising me by answering for me. When the intensity broke, when the world narrowed to breath and the dull throb of skin against skin, something inside me wanted to ask for more, and something else wanted to run until my legs gave out. I could not tell which feeling belonged to fear and which to something like desire. In the pale wash of morning, I woke with my body aching and my mind strewn with questions. He was already gone. The bed smelled of him. My hands moved without permission, touching places that ached, and I found the awkward, foolish thing. I had told him I wanted it. The memory of saying it came back like a half-remembered dream, both shameful and true. I felt angry at myself, angry at him, angry at the way his absence made the room feel like a wound. When he returned and saw me moving slowly on the sheets, the expression on his face was unreadable. He stepped to the doorway, took off his watch, and with a gentleness I had not expected, placed his palm against my forehead as if to steady me. "Rest," he said quietly, and the words sounded like an order and an apology braided together. I lay there, lungs tight, and let the strange lull take me. Even then, as confusion and something like a dangerous tenderness coiled in my chest, I knew nothing about what I was becoming and less about what I would forgive. That evening I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Calm, maybe even happiness. It frightened me a little to realize it came from him. I decided to meet my friend, to tell her the impossible story of how a man like Hami could make me both safe and uncertain. I didn't know that, somewhere else in the city, Emma was meeting the man who had ruined Hami's family. Her anger had eaten her sense. She offered to help him hurt Hami by exposing his weakness. She thought that would make Hami run back to her. The man agreed, hiding his true plan. He wanted Hami destroyed completely. When I left the house that night, I refused the guards he sent with me. I wanted to be normal again, to walk streets that didn't whisper his name. Somewhere between the cafe and the road home, everything blurred. The next thing I knew, I woke in a warehouse lit by cold bulbs. Emma stood there beside that man, her smile sharp as glass. "So you're the girl who made Hami forget me," she said. "Let's see how long he protects you." The man lifted his phone, called Hami, and put it on speaker. "I have something of yours," he said. On the other end came Hami's voice, flat, distant, impossible. "Then keep it," he said. "I don't trade for weakness." The line went dead. The laughter that followed tore something in me. Emma leaned close. "He's not coming," she whispered. "You're nothing." For a long time I believed her. The night stretched thin with waiting and regret. Then, when everything had gone quiet, someone's hand touched the rope at my wrists, cutting me free. "Come," a man's voice said. "There isn't time." I ran, blind with fear, and outside the world erupted with noise, shouts, engines, the metallic echo of chaos. A figure caught me before I could fall. His arm came around me, warm and shaking. "Everything's fine," he murmured. I looked up and saw Hami. His shoulder was bleeding, but his eyes were clear. "Why did you come?" I asked. "Because I know how he works," he said quietly. "If I'd admitted what you mean to me, they would have used you to destroy everything left of me. I had to make them believe you were nothing, so you could live." The world blurred again, but for a different reason this time. "So I'm important to you?" I whispered. "More than everything," he said simply. Later, when the city was calm again, he found me by the same sea where it had all begun. His arm was still in a sling, mine was full of questions. He didn't kneel or make speeches, just looked at me with the kind of steadiness that had once terrified me. "Marry me," he said. "Let's try to build something clean out of all this ruin." And somehow, in the hush between the waves and the wind, I said yes. The night of our wedding wasn't peaceful, it was stormy, wild, and restless, just like us. The rain fell against the glass walls of his mansion, lightning flashing across the sea. I stood there in my white dress, my heart heavy with everything we'd survived, blood, betrayal, fear, and that strange thing that still tied me to him. Hami walked toward me slowly, his black suit half undone, his eyes unreadable. "You still look afraid," he said softly, stepping close enough for me to feel his warmth. "I'm not afraid," I whispered, though my voice trembled. "I just don't know what we are." He smiled, that dangerous, beautiful smile. "We are everything they fear, Julia. We are love and ruin." Outside, thunder broke like a warning, but inside, the world went silent. He brushed his thumb across my cheek, the same hand that once pulled a trigger. "You saw me at my worst," he said, and still didn't run far enough. "Maybe," I said, meeting his gaze. "I wanted to see what happens when a monster learns to love." He laughed, a dark, soft laugh that made my chest ache. "Monsters don't learn love," he said. "They become it." And then he kissed my forehead, not with hunger, but with something deeper, something almost human. The air between us grew heavy with unspoken promises. He took my hand and placed it on his chest, over the steady beat that once belonged to no one. "This," he said, "is yours." Even if it kills me. I didn't answer. I just looked into his eyes, those eyes that had seen death, power, and fear, and found a reflection of myself. Not the innocent girl who once cried at the sight of blood, but the woman who could stand beside the man who spilled it. We weren't heroes. We weren't even good people. But we were ours. When the night ended, and the storm finally calmed, the city whispered of two names that could never be separated again, not by fear, not by death. Hami and Julia. The monster and the girl who taught him how to bleed. The lovers who burned the world and called it love.